We are now recording. Okay, so we're going to continue today talking about compensation. We'll finish that up today, I expect, and move on to the next subject, which is continuation of compensation, talking about benefits and benefit programs and incentives. So let's just review a little bit last week as we started talking about compensation. So compensation has to do with payment, wages, how much a worker gets paid. And we said originally that there's kind of two kinds of compensation, direct and indirect, which is something that anybody should be familiar with from like law class. So what is the difference between direct and indirect compensation? Chandra, can you tell us the difference?
Direct is like you just like give them a wages, like a commission or promotion. You can get promoted, but indirect is like you can give the vacation or giving like insurance, something like that.
Sure.
Indirectly, yeah.
Sure. Another way to say this is that direct is something tangible. It's something that we can sort of touch in the sense of it is a car, it is your salary. You could go to the bank and get out the actual cash money and you can touch it. Indirect are things that are valuable, but they're not money. You can't spend them. A car still has value because you can sell a car for cash. Even airplane tickets, you can sell for cash, but you cannot sell your vacation days for cash. You can't sell your insurance for cash. You can't sell having a nice office for cash. So anything you can sell for cash is direct. And pretty much that's what we're talking about in this subject with compensation, are things that could be sold for cash. Indirect is anything that you get and it is payment of a kind, but it can't really be sold. So getting the opportunity to make your own schedule is certainly a kind of incentive or benefit, but you can't sell that. Getting the opportunity to travel more or to do job sharing and rotation and try other jobs in the company. It's a form of incentive, but it can't be sold for cash. Then we talked about a bunch of characteristics of good compensation programs. And the first and the second were this idea of internal versus external equity. Christine, can you tell us a little about that? What's the difference between internal equity and external equity?
So internal is like people doing the same job in the company. They must be paid similar or the same amount, like fairly. And external is like the payment must be similar to the same job in the same industry compared to other companies.
Sure, good. So for internal, we're talking about similar jobs in the same company, and external, we're talking about similar jobs in different companies. And then we looked at a bunch of different characteristics that are all useful. You don't need to know all of them, but in the exam, you should be prepared to talk about why an important compensation or some characteristics of a good compensation program, such as the amount of time and energy that's put into it, whether it's supported by senior management, whether it allows for motivation, growth, things like that. Then we talked about job descriptions, because job descriptions are very useful when we're creating a good compensation program. And there's nothing to review about job descriptions particularly. The next thing we talked about was 4 factors in compensation programs. Chloe, can you tell us the 4 factors in compensation programs?
What do you mean by the 4 factors?
There were 4 factors in determining pay rates. These are the 4 factors. What are legal factors? What does that mean? Well, Chloe, let's say that we have a company, okay? And I'm the CEO of this company. We are a language school. and you're my new HR manager. And I've asked you, how much should we pay our teachers? You know, we have teachers, we have Chinese support staff, we have lots of different people. We have some people we hire from outside to make our lesson plans. We have a lot of different people that we pay, and I want you to help us decide on compensation rates. One thing you need to consider is whether or not these compensation rates are legal. So what kind of things do we have to consider in this subject of whether things are legal? Can anybody give some thoughts? What do we need to know as
Exempt
to whether
and non-exempt, maybe?
I'm sorry?
Exempt and non-exempt?
Sure. So the FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act, we need to know. Now, what is that about, Chandra? The FLSA and exempt, non-exempt?
It's about like FLSA is about overtime payment. So employer must pay 1.5 times a normal pay for any hours. And also exempt is like for the people who have like a lawyer, or the people who like, even though they get overworking hour, they don't have to get paid. They are exempt.
Okay.
Non-exempt, yeah.
Thank you. So Chloe, there are some people in our company who will be not exempt from the FLSA. And that means that they must get paid overtime if they work more than 40 hours a week. What kind of employee needs to get overtime if they work over 40 hours a week?
The high positions, I guess.
Do high positions get overtime? Do doctors at a hospital get overtime? Are doctors in a hospital paid by the hour?
No, not by the hour.
So people who have high positions do not get overtime because they already have a good salary. They're expected that it's expected they have to work a lot. So a CEO or a CTO, or, you know, the head of the engineering department, or, you know, somebody who's a high executive position, they don't get overtime. Somebody who gets paid hourly will get overtime, or somebody who is at a lower level. So we do need to look at our first legal consideration. The employees in our organization, are they senior level or are they lower level? If they're lower level, like some of the administrative staff, they do need to get overtime. If they're higher level, like managers, then they don't. So the FLSA and this exempt, non-exempt question is probably the first legal consideration. Do these people need to get overtime? Now, in addition to overtime, the FLSA talks about some other things also, such as do they have a maximum number of hours and a minimum number of hours? There are some jobs where you can't exceed 6 days a week. You know, there's just a maximum number of hours. The next thing to consider for legal is like the Equal Pay Act, you know, men and women, then Title VII, which is all about discrimination. We'd have to look, is the discrimination adverse impact or adverse effect? And you don't have to worry about the last two, that's government jobs. Okay, the next factor was union factors. And we didn't really talk about union factors very much, except to talk about labor unions and the idea that labor unions pretty much are only looking at collective bargaining. So when we talk about unions, we're just talking about minimum wage, things like that. Next was policy factors. Policy factors, I said, is pretty important. That looks at strategic alignment, right? Strategy aims and an aligned reward strategy. Can you tell me, Anais, what is an aligned reward strategy? What does that mean?
It means that the compensation and the reward is related to the company's goals.
Sure, it's related to the company's goals. So we talked last time and did a little activity about that, something about the rewards menu for teachers at CIP. How would you give their compensation? based on this idea of reward menus, that the compensation can be somewhat flexible. And not everybody wants the same kind of compensation. We also talked about the 4x4 matrix. Harry, can you tell me what is the 4x4 matrix?
No, sorry.
Jody, what's the 4x4 matrix?
Oh, wait, sir. I'm looking for it.
No, Jonathan, you remember what's the 4x4 matrix?
Oh, sorry, sir, I don't remember.
Okay, anybody?
Here.
It's this
the-
idea here. of-
It's a way to like categorize employees based on how important they are to the company.
Sure. A way to categorize employees based on how important they are to the company. So the idea with the 4x4 matrix is we can't just evaluate employees and then give them compensation based on their evaluation, because some employees are incredibly important to the company. They're mission critical. We need them. Other employees are important, or other employees are core or necessary, or other employees are replaceable. And if someone got a very good evaluation, but they're replaceable, maybe we don't want to allocate our compensation to them. Even if someone got a lower evaluation, if they're mission critical, we don't want to lose this person. So we have to think about the value to the person, to the value of this job to the organization. So that has to do with policy, right? These are all policy factors. Whether we have a rewards menu that aligns with our company goals, and whether we are looking at how important people are to the company. Finally was equity factors, and that has to do with internal and external equity. Then we moved on to something like the Hay Guide chart. And the Hay Guide chart was this beginning of how do we create a quantitative analysis for compensation? How do we make sure that we have a number that we can put on each job to help determine how much they get paid? And this is where we stopped last week pretty much. So we'll pick up from here. So, okay, talking about the Hay Guide. And we did go through these last week, but the idea that we need to have some way to give a quantitative number to each employee that relates to their compensation. And this is a process. So, for example, we could prepare the job descriptions, and we could measure each job's critical components, and we would assign points to the critical components. And we'll do this in a second. We'll go through it more specifically. And we have all of these different points like know-how and problem solving and decision making, and those all come from the Hay Guide chart. We assign points to these. We then rank the positions based on the points, and then we make sure they meet the benchmarks. So as we said before, there are some basic ideas here. One is the idea of having the job description and job analysis. That's a pretty basic idea. Another is the idea of having a benchmark. Christine, what's a benchmark?
It's like a standard that you need to reach or something.
Okay, it's like a standard, that's true. Constance, what do we do with this standard? Why is it important to have a standard? What's it a standard of?
To put a value on.
A standard of value? I mean, kind of. Let's say that you are the HR manager in our new company. And again, we are an English teaching school, and you're our HR manager. We need to have some standards for all of our English teachers. What kind of standard are we talking about for the English teachers?
Like an English proficiency, I don't know, to be able to teach.
Sure, that could be one standard, that we expect all teachers to be able to get at least an 8.5 on the IELTS.
to deal with children, take care of them?
Sure. No, we'll have to figure out because what's the standard? I mean, IELTS, we could say 8.5. It's something we can measure. To say take care of children, that's pretty hard to measure. How do you know if somebody has met that level?
Your university degree or something?
Okay, that could be a standard. I guess for taking care of children, we might talk about number of customer complaints from the parents. You know, that if the parents don't complain or if the children are happy, we can sort of measure that by asking the child. You know, but we need some kind of measurement to know if somebody is meeting this standard or exceeding the standard or falling short of the standard. We have to have some kind of measurable standard. And these are our benchmarks. So when we decide who gets paid more, now let's say that Chandra has been teaching for years and none of the parents complain when she teaches, and she has an IELTS of 9 or whatever the highest is, and she has a degree in teaching children. I mean, she has all these things, she meets the standard. Now she might get paid more than someone, Chloe, who just joined our company last month. She doesn't have any experience yet. She recently graduated, and there've been a couple of complaints from parents that she's too serious. You know, maybe Chandra would get paid more, but we still want something much more quantitative, so that when Chloe comes to our office and says, why does Chandra get paid more? We can very clearly show there are very specific reasons. And each of these is out of a number. So practical and technical knowledge might be out of 20. Planning and organizing skills might be out of 20. We might have each of these has a number out of 20. And for some of these, maybe Chandra has a higher number than Chloe, and we add them all up. And at the end, maybe Chandra gets an 85 and Chloe gets an 80. And we say to Chloe, you see, you know, for example, on communicating, we measure that by the number of parents who've, you know, spoken to us or brought their kids back. And Chandra got a 19 and you got a 17. If you want to get more money, you need to bring this one up from a 17 to a 19. You know, this is what we're trying to get at with the compensation system. Something where if an employee comes to us, we have these really clear numbers that we can really easily show you. Here's where your score could be improved. And if you improve your score, then you will get a higher compensation. That's what we're trying to do here. So we're going to start with these benchmarks, this standard, as was said. And the benchmarks are usually done by job function and by level. And we'll measure it in terms of total points. So the benchmark for a teacher might be, you know, out of 100 points, and maybe we have a senior teacher who's been teaching more than 3 years and can teach a class alone, and a junior teacher. So we'd have level, we'd have job function, and we would have total points. And the reason we're doing that is so that people can measure their points and they know what to improve. And then, our last slide last week was this one where we talked about how to establish pay rates. And we stopped there and said, we'll pick up there today. Okay, so the first step in establishing pay rates for whether it's our teachers or the administrators or the vice president or anybody is to conduct a salary survey. And this gives us our external equity. Then we'll figure out the relative worth, which I said is kind of the key idea for all of this, and that's our internal equity. And then we'll organize this stuff into grades, curves, and ranges, right? Grades, curves, and ranges. So we start with a salary survey. So salary surveys are external equity, and that is what people are earning at similar jobs in other companies. This gives us kind of a benchmark. Another way to say it is that it anchors the pay scale. So we have an idea of what you should get paid as an English teacher based on what people get paid in other companies like Disney or EF or whatever. We know a general benchmark. So that's clear, right? That should be clear. Once we have that, okay, a couple more things about the salary survey. One, we need to make sure it is the same industry. We can't measure someone who does marketing for a small English school against someone who does marketing for Coca-Cola. They're very different. We need to make sure that the information is the same on the two jobs in terms of things like the hours worked or the benefits or the method of payment. We need to get this information by either interviewing or asking people questions. And that's it. We just want to make sure that we are comparing two similar jobs. So questions you might ask yourself as an HR manager when you're getting this information. Does the organization compare with ours in terms of background and skills? Do they have employees who are from this kind of background, this kind of university, this kind of certification, this kind of training? Have any of our employees left to work at that company? Are the company's operations similar to ours? Do we have enough jobs in common to make this valid? Is the company competitive? So if you don't want to compare our company to a failing company, we want to compare our company to a relatively successful company. And then, is our data accurate and reliable? But all we're doing here is establishing external equity. That just means comparing the jobs in our company to a significantly similar company in the same industry, in the same location too. We don't want to compare a company in Shanghai to a company that's way out in a small village. That might be very different. Okay, step two. Well, here's some examples of where we might find the data on how much people get paid. I don't know if you guys have ever looked. What I think is more common now is a website called Glassdoor. Salary.com is still useful. I would not go to CNN Money. I would say Glassdoor is the most common now if you're looking for how much do different jobs get paid. Has anybody looked at Glassdoor? Has anybody used that website? Anais, what did you look at Glassdoor for?
Just for the project, we had to do a project on these kinds of websites.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's a very useful website if you want to know how much people get paid. Okay, step two is relative worth. And this is something we need to spend a little bit of time on, because this is where we get these points, these numbers, is here in this area of relative worth. So what we're going to do with relative worth is we're going to compare some jobs in terms of content. And the content can be the effort it takes to do the job, the skills required to do the job, the background required to do the job. There's a lot of different ways to look at content. So what I'd like to do is, I want you to think about what kind of job you'd like to have when you graduate. You know, what's a job you'd like to do when you graduate? Jonathan, what do you want to do when you graduate?
I wanted to go into events, but that's not happening anymore. So let's see.
How virtual events are still happening, but hey, the vaccine's coming, man. Don't worry.
Yeah,
Harry,
I'm hoping.
Harry, what do you want to do when you graduate?
I still haven't really decided, to be honest.
Sky's the limit. Pick a job. You've 10 seconds.
I don't know, maybe something to do with Chinese language as well.
Okay, so you're going to be a Chinese language teacher. That's a terrible. Actually, you know what? In America, that's a fantastic choice. I really shouldn't say that. I was looking into this a while ago, just out of curiosity. Right now, the market for high school Chinese language teachers is huge, and almost none of them are foreigners. But interestingly, as I think you guys know, foreigners and Chinese people teach languages quite differently. There is sort of a Chinese way of teaching, and it's pretty much very much like page 1 goes to page 2, goes to page 3, goes to page 4. It's very structured. Actually, it's a great market for language teachers. Chloe, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Working in marketing and communication.
Okay. Communications marketing. Mikhail, what do you want to be?
Something to do with Gazprom, probably. Something
I'm
with
sorry?
oil.
Oil. You want to be an
Something
oil
with
baron?
Russian that's
Okay,
pretty
great.
big, pretty influential.
You want to be influential. Okay, great. Jody, what are you going to be?
Same like Chloe, marketer.
Okay, Christine, what are you going to be?
Not sure yet. Still
No,
deciding.
you have 10 seconds. Tell me what you're going to be.
I'm just gonna say marketing as well.
You're just going to, okay. Everybody here is going to do marketing. That's like the standard answer. Fine. All right, so here's what I want you to do. I'm going to put you in groups, in breakout rooms, and what I want you to discuss is, oh, I should keep sharing so you can see it. What I want you to discuss is this. The job that you're going to do when you graduate, whether it's marketing or being in oil or communications or a teacher, are these jobs comparable in terms of difficulty? Are they equally difficult? Are there more skills or knowledge required for your job versus somebody else's? Is there more responsibility required for your job? Just whose job is the hardest? You know, so take a few minutes in breakout rooms and you can argue about whose job is the hardest. I'll put you in 2 rooms. There's a bunch of you. Okay, let's go around the circle here. So say your job and say how hard it is. Constance, what job do you want?
Business development manager.
Okay. Christine, what job do you want?
I'm just gonna keep saying marketing
Great.
manager.
Your marketing manager. So we business development manager, marketing manager. Misha's going to be an influential oil baron. And what is Anais going to be?
A CEO.
Did you say she? Please tell me you didn't say CEO. I've never heard that before.
Really? You should watch Modern Family then.
I love Modern Family. I haven't seen it in a long time now. I don't know what to say about that word.
Wait, Anais, what was your thing? I didn't hear.
She's going to be a CEO.
A CEO.
Yeah.
Progressive.
Okay. It'll be a defining point in her story. Okay, great. So whose job is hardest?
I think oil influencer is weird. It's hard.
Okay, those are very different words. It's
Okay,
hard. What makes it
specifically I
hard?
meant like HRM or like maybe corporate law in like Gazprom or.
Oh, okay.
HRM.
Yeah, either HRM or corporate law. In Gazprom, that's like a good position.
Okay, so you think that would be the hardest job of the ones that were said?
No, I just mean like
Well, now
specifically.
that
I'm just trying to clear up.
Yeah,
Not
now
like
that I
clear,
understand, I don't think it would
What's
be
the hardest job?
Maybe
CEO,
maybe a business developer.
business developer.
Yeah.
Constance, do you agree?
In terms of competence, yes.
Okay.
Because you have to get an overview on like pretty much like and competences on a lot of like fields.
Okay, fair enough. Then tell me which of the jobs has the most responsibility?
CEO, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
So would you say then CEO maybe should get paid the most?
Well, I think CEOs have a long way to go, but yeah, we should get paid more.
Okay. Who should get paid the least?
Maybe the marketing manager?
Maybe.
When you're marketing manager, don't you have like commissions?
Maybe. I mean, if you're talking about something in the oil industry, that might be getting paid the most.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that would get paid the most if that's not the hardest and doesn't have the most responsibility?
Connections.
It's
Because oil
bribes.
is scarce.
Okay, so Anna, you said scarcity, but the other two answers had to do with sort of dirty hands, under the table transactions. Even
Yes.
if your hands are clean, do you think that oil would get paid the most?
No.
Okay.
In terms of money, probably not. But I mean, you can get paid like, as I said, like an influence or in like friends connections.
Okay, so oil has the most opportunities to
Do you
make
mean like a
influential
lobbyist?
deals.
Sorry, what?
Would you say, Anais?
Do you mean like a lobbyist, like an oil lobbyist?
No, not a lobbyist. Like, I mean, in Russia we have like Gazprom, which is like 30% of our economy is like one corporation. So it's de facto, the largest company that we have. And if you're a corporate lawyer there, or you work in HRM in Gazprom, I mean, you're gonna.
Okay, but then the job is law or HRM.
Mhm.
That's just the industry. Okay, so you're talking about law or HRM. Well, in that case, yeah, I mean, a development manager might make more than HRM. I would say marketing, development, and HRM are all comparable, probably in terms of level of difficulty. I think development might be a little more difficult. CEO is very different because it depends on the kind of company, right? CEO, I mean, if it's a small company versus a big company, that's a huge difference. Okay, let's go back to the main room. So I was with one group. With the other group, whose job was the most difficult? Did you guys have a conclusion?
So we compared two jobs basically because everybody just wanted to go into marketing, I guess. So we compared marketing communications to running an institute on English language for Korean students in Shanghai. It's a mouthful.
Very
Specific.
specific.
Yeah, it's specific, but we took it. And we basically determined that like all factors considered, like the jobs are pretty similar because it's a lot of communication. But in the end, probably the running the institute would be more difficult, just from just from a like standpoint of having more on your plate, being
Probably.
in charge of more people, and then also the education standpoint, right? Like shaping young minds would be like a more difficult thing to do than just working for a company. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Sure. Well, I think if you get a job with marketing, you come in and they train you to some extent. They tell you where to sit. You have a mentor. You're working with a team of people who have been doing the same job. They know how the marketing pitches go and the proposals, and they know how to design one. And I mean, you're kind of guided in how to do this. Opening a school definitely has a lot of different responsibilities, and in that sense might be harder. Which one of those two do you think requires more personal education?
Probably the marketing one, to be honest,
Probably.
because
Probably.
the company will want you to have some sort of prior experience or a university degree or something like that. Yeah.
Or a master's or something.
Yeah.
Right. But anybody theoretically with the proper language skills could open the school. Nobody's telling you have to have a master's or a bachelor's to do it. So that's true. And then, the question obviously that we're trying to get at is which one should be paid more, right? So, this idea of which one should be paid more? Let's talk about a score for each of these jobs based on out of 100, how hard these jobs are. So a teacher, what do you think, Jody? Give me a score out of 100 based on how hard it is to be a teacher.
70.
70, okay. So teacher gets like a 70. That's not pretty. How about a lawyer? Anybody? How hard's a lawyer?
90.
Oh, we started pretty hard with this. I don't agree with the 70. to
Okay,
be
what do you think it should be
perfectly
for the
honest.
70?
Like a 40.
A 40, man, you don't have a lot of respect for teachers.
No, it's not even true. But like, what teachers are we talking about? I have had some bad teachers in like preschool, like not preschool, but like high school or middle school, and they all made the cut. So like,
I had some terrible teachers in high school. Oh my God, some of those people needed to retire. 70, okay, maybe 40. What do you think, Chloe? Do you agree? 70, 40, where are you on the teacher thing?
I'm more on 70 than 40.
Okay. Okay. Chloe, what about a doctor?
Same as the lawyer, 90, 95.
Okay. How about Misha, a dog walker?
Wait, 30?
30. Anybody agree or disagree on
30?
dog walker?
I did that job
30?
once, and it's definitely a 10.
Yes, exactly. You get out of that by like 40 and
Okay,
like
it's not that hard.
Okay. How about Christina, garbage collector?
Around like 50, 60.
50 or 60, so like a
I would
55.
say 50. Yeah, just 50. Or what?
that is.
Anybody disagree?
I actually agree fully. Like, it seems pretty hard, actually. Like, underrated, to be honest.
Okay. How about a bathroom attendant? Somebody who stands in the bathroom and gives out towels.
Probably
Johnny's
30,
probably gonna say like 50 again.
40.
We on 50? What do you think, Anais?
No, I'd say 15. If you just have to give the the paper towels. So.
Well, I mean, I think you also might, probably. I don't think you have to clean. I don't think that would necessarily be your job. So maybe a 15, okay. How about the cruise director on a pleasure boat?
That's a clear 80 for me.
An 80? Okay, Jody, do you agree that the cruise director on a boat gets an 80? That's how hard it is?
I would say like maybe 60.
You'd say 60? I mean,
The
Jonathan, are
pleasure
you saying?
director, like the
Yeah, just not somebody who runs the boat. You're not actually driving the boat. You're just the director of, kind of the manager of the boat. So if we're at 80, we're talking about pretty close to being a doctor.
Yeah, but it's a high pressure environment, and you're in that, like, it's a boat. You know what I'm saying? Everything could go wrong.
I guess.
You're responsible for these people on a metal shell in the ocean. Excuse me, that's a lot of responsibility.
I guess that's true. As a doctor, you're only responsible really for one person at a time. Chandra, do you agree that being a cruise director is similar responsibility level to being a doctor?
No, I guess doctor is way higher.
So what number would you give for cruise director?
Like 75.
Okay, so you're in this area.
Yeah.
Chandra, how about a pilot?
Oh, I think they have even higher responsibility than doctor, I guess.
A pilot?
Yeah.
So what number would you give to a
Could you
pilot?
95.
explain to me that logic, though?
95. Because
You
they are
just
kind of
said
like,
the person. What? That's literally the same situation. What do you think pilots do? It's only autopilot, anyways. It's the same situation.
because
Okay,
pilot,
say,
it
like,
needs more skills, like more
Do you
harder
really
and
think?
like,
Do you think
So
Yeah.
Jonathan, what would you give a pilot?
the same? 80.
80.
Yeah.
Really? I really honestly would give a pilot something like a like a
Johnny, what's a
45
hard
probably.
job for you? Like, what will get 100? What do we need to do to make you to get you to say 100? Like, I don't know.
I would have said a doctor is like around the 90 to 95 to 100, and I would have said the CEO of a Fortune 500 company is around 95 to 100 as well.
I would say like 100 if this is based on the responsibility of the job, but this is because of the only hard job, right?
Well, you know, this is how a lot of people who didn't study HR think about compensation. They just think about how hard is the job. Jody,
No,
do
I
you
think
think
about responsibility.
yeah, I mean, hard could mean different things to different people. Jody, would you rather be a CEO or a garbage collector?
Sure, CEO.
Right. So, you know, is a CEO more difficult? Yeah, but it's also maybe preferable. In some ways, cleaning, and I don't have it on this list here, but cleaning a bathroom is hard. Cleaning a building every single day is really hard work. Moving packages in a warehouse. Is moving packages in a warehouse physically more difficult than being a lawyer?
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah.
I mean, I've been a lawyer. It's not very physically difficult, you know? But lawyers will get paid a lot more than somebody who moves packages in a warehouse. Harry, is that fair?
Yeah, unfortunately
Why?
it is.
I mean, this is what's going on in the world right now in America, this discussion of what we think of as necessary services. So people who drive taxis or cars, bus drivers, people who move packages, people who clean, why are they paid so much less? Why do we give such a higher score to the title director or doctor or lawyer?
I guess the
Because they
time.
don't have to get long period of training or education, unlike lawyer or doctor.
Okay, that's true. We expect the
think in the
CEO to have
States-
education.
In the States, probably the problem why they're not getting paid enough or like less is probably because they're like mostly minorities. So it might be a reason why as well. Like, who else is going to really do these jobs? And you know, they just kind of take advantage of that.
I think that's true. I think there are a lot of problems around that. But there's definitely this idea of what hard means, where you guys are all people going to school. For you, it might be harder, right? For me, I think it would be harder to clean bathrooms and move packages every day than it would to be a CEO or a doctor or a lawyer, because that kind of physical work is so demanding. So I'm defining hard in a very specific way. However, I like school, you know, and of course you guys all love school. Chloe, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you love school? A 10, right? So since you love school, so much, it would be easier for you to become a director or a CEO or a teacher, doctor, lawyer. Would you rather have those kind of jobs than a more physical job? Chloe, do you think people who have these physical jobs, physically demanding, should get paid more?
I don't know. It's a hard question.
How hard,
Because
on a scale of 1 to 100, how hard is the question?
10.
Well, that's not very hard.
Because we need to define, like, if we give more money to people based on like physical skills or educational skills. Like
Okay.
in society, we tend to give more money to people that have been doing masters and high studies and that kind of stuff. But a physical job is super hard as well.
Constance, what do you think? Do you agree?
Like there should be a balance. If you have a lot of degrees and a lot of competency, you should get a good salary. But if you don't and your job rely on like hard like work condition, then you should also get paid like adequately to that.
Okay, so you think that physical labor should it be
Yes.
comparable
competence.
to academic labor? Should someone who moves boxes get the same money as someone who has a PhD?
PhD in what?
Moving boxes? No, like a PhD in marketing.
But it's not the same work at all.
Like for people who don't have like diploma, like you should base their salary on something, and I think it's not really fair to not give them a proper salary based on something that they already don't have.
Which is more useful to our society? Somebody who cleans a building or somebody who's a manager of marketing?
Cleans the building, not marketing.
So do we pay salaries to people based on how useful they are to society at all?
No, it's based on status.
How much money they make for that
Okay.
company.
Okay, so their monetary value to the company, how much they can generate for the company. Chandra, do you think we should pay people on how useful they are to society?
I guess so. Yeah.
You guess so? So
I think-
then maybe someone like police or fire department or cleaners might earn more than directors and CEOs and managers.
No, but yeah, that's what I think, but the real society doesn't. In Korea, like even elementary school teacher or firefighter, police, they don't get much money. So yeah, it's
I mean, this is a challenge here when we work in HR to try to figure out compensation. Because it's very easy to just look at what other companies do and pick a number and say, okay, doctors make this and lawyers make that and marketing managers make this. But as we see in the modern world, there are real problems with this. And we can actually make a difference. So there are two ways we can look at it. Now, the way we've been looking at it is what we would probably call the intuitive approach, right? This idea of your intuition, your opinion. Well, I think a doctor is about an 80. Why? I don't know. I just think that. I think a lawyer is about a 75. Okay. I think a dog walker is about a 10. We're just kind of judging. What are we judging on? Well, that's the problem. All of us have slightly different standards. Some people are looking at what's more difficult to do. Some people are looking at what's useful to society. Some people are looking at what value does it bring to the organization. Some people are looking at how much education is required. And that's part of the problem is we all have different standards when we use our intuition. So instead of using intuition, what we want to use is called compensable factors. And these are very specific factors that we can put numbers on. So some of the factors might be skills. What skills are required to be a marketing manager versus what skills are required to be a garbage collector or to move packages in a warehouse? So to move packages in a warehouse, while it's a very important job, or to clean a building, while it's an incredibly important job, the number of skills required, let's say out of 1 to 10, might only be a 2. You don't actually need a lot of developed skills in order to clean. However, to be a marketing manager, you need quite a lot of skills. Not only organizational skills, communication skills, you have to understand a lot of theories about marketing. You need to also be able to work on a deadline, create projects, present things to customers, use different kinds of software, use graphic design. Could somebody who's a CEO or a marketing manager clean? Yes, they could. Could somebody who cleans be a market manager? Not without training. So that's one factor we look at. We look at the skills required. Number 2, and I think this is a really important factor, is effort. Which requires more effort? Well, cleaning or moving packages requires a lot of effort. Being a marketing manager in some ways does too, It requires a different kind of effort. It is more emotional labor, but it doesn't require as much physical effort. And so we separate physical effort and emotional effort. Responsibility is another very important compensable factor. Somebody who cleans a bathroom doesn't actually have that much responsibility. If things don't go well, so what? I mean, you just, okay, then the toilet's a little bit dirty and you have to clean it tomorrow. Harry, what kind of responsibility does a marketing manager have? Tell me a little about the kind of responsibility for that. And of course, I know you're not a marketing manager, but just in your opinion.
Maybe the responsibility to achieve goals, maybe the marketing message.
So, okay, what happens if a marketing manager does a bad job?
Effect on the sales.
Okay, sure, it could affect sales. And then who cares, right? Does it matter? What do you think? That was Jody, right? Jody, what do you think? Does it matter? So, okay, sales go down. Who cares?
Yeah, yes, it's very important because.
Why? Oh no, people drink less Pepsi. Who cares?
But if you are the if you are the owner, you want your sales increase, right?
Well, I guess you want it, but so what? I mean, look, Constance, if somebody does a bad job at cleaning, then the place is dirty. If somebody does a bad job at moving boxes, then a box doesn't get where it needs to go. If somebody does a bad job at being a marketing manager, then I guess you sell less of the product, I suppose, right?
Yes.
So who cares? Why does this have a lot of responsibility? Can anybody tell me?
Because there is people that are like your subordinate and you need to handle their job.
So it's not about, it's not about how many products you sell. It's not about selling more or less Pepsi. It's about the fact that if you do a bad job as a marketing manager, people could get fired. People could lose their jobs. They could lose their homes. They could lose their insurance, because you are not in charge of Pepsi. You are in charge of people. Managers are not in charge of products. They're in charge of people. And managers do have a high level of responsibility because if a manager does a bad job, people can suffer. If you do a bad job cleaning a building, the only thing that suffers is the building. If you do a bad job delivering packages, you're not going to affect people's, maybe one package is very important, but you're not going to affect people's jobs. Obviously, a doctor, a lawyer, a pilot has a lot of responsibility. Working conditions. Now, people are not always paid by working conditions, but it is something we can look at and give a number to. Lawyers have different working conditions. Would you say, Christine, how are the working conditions for a doctor? Are they difficult working conditions?
Yeah, do you mean like a family doctor or like a surgeon or something like that?
Let's say a doctor in a hospital.
I think the working conditions is very intense. If they're like having incoming the emergency patients and everything like that.
Sure, it can be very upsetting. My sister is a social worker in a hospital and she needs to give bad news to families. And is it hard? Is it hard for my sister to tell a family that their child is dead? Is that hard? Well, it's so difficult to define that word because it doesn't take a lot of effort. You just go into a room and say a sentence. She doesn't have to move boxes. She doesn't have to do anything like that. And she gets to sit in a nice office and the climate is controlled. Actually, it's not a very nice office, but it's inside. But that kind of working condition, a lot of people would not be able to do it because you really need, and you do need training to do something like that. Okay, so these are all different kinds of compensable factors. And I will tell you that on the final exam, you will have some kind of situation where you are the HR manager and there are jobs that need to get salaries and you need to decide what the salaries will be. And you're going to use these methods. So we already have a bunch of different evaluation methods. For job ranking, you use one compensable factor like difficulty. So like what we just did as an exercise. Who's that? Who's making noise? Who's making noise? Oh, guess it was Jonathan making noise. Okay, so the exercise that we just did, where we looked at all of these and just gave them a score and just said, what's the hardest, doctor and lawyer? What's the next hardest? Or maybe CEO, doctor, lawyer. Next hardest is pilot and cruise director. Next hardest is teacher. We just went through that. That's called the job ranking method, where you're the HR director, you take all the jobs in the company and you just rank them. That's one method that you can use. What I prefer that we use is that we look at a variety of compensable factors and use the job classification method. So this is the one I would like you to kind of remember and use. And look how nice that star is. That's a nice star. So we want jobs that are similar in their total number of points. So when I say total number of points, what I mean is we want several compensable factors. And now there is no exact list of compensable factors, but let's talk about some that we just used. Misha, can you tell me a compensable factor?
Like a skill that you can have. I don't know, language,
Sure.
knowledge of languages.
Okay, sure. So that's one factor would be skill. Another factor would be language or linguistic knowledge. Jonathan, can you tell me another compensable factor? Now, how about Rodrigo? Can you tell me, say, a compensable factor?
Yeah, working conditions.
Sure, working conditions. Chandra, another factor? So we have, well, what is something that we would use to rank how much people should get paid?
Responsibilities.
Sure, responsibilities is another factor.
Effort.
Effort, sure. Any others? Skill, effort, responsibility, working conditions.
Intuitive.
Education.
Education, absolutely. You know, people with 2 PhDs get paid more. Not every single one in the whole world, but they do. People with PhDs get paid more than people who never went to college. Is that fair? Chandra, is that fair?
Pardon, can you repeat again? Sorry.
Someone with a PhD gets paid more than someone who never went to college.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Why?
Because it means you spend extra several years for certain, PhD or your own degree. It means you invested your money, time to yourself for further education.
Sure, that's very true. And then, by the other side, people could say, well, but all you did was go and sit in class and learn stuff, and other people were out there moving boxes and cleaning buildings and fixing cars, and that's very hard too, and that's true too. But the fact is, education is a compensable factor. So I'm not going to give you an exact list of compensable factors. I will when we do a review for our exercise for like a final exam question, but I'm telling you that what you need to understand is there are all of these different factors. skill, effort, knowledge, ability, responsibility, working conditions, education, language skills. There's lots of factors. And this is how we create a quantitative measurement, is we use numbers for all of these factors. So we use job analysis to collect the factors. Then we put the jobs into groups. Then we select which compensable factors are we going to use. Now, some jobs we just use difficulty. That's it. Do you think it's reasonable? Who should I ask? Harry, do you think it's reasonable in CIP? Now, I'm talking about everybody, just every job that includes the people who clean the rooms all the way up to Eling. Do you think it's reasonable to just pay everybody by job difficulty?
I don't think so.
You think so?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Oh, why not?
Because some jobs are harder, but maybe they didn't require so much time. Like the education is not the same. Like, for example, cleaning is probably a much harder job and longer working hours, maybe.
Do you think it's fair, Chloe? Do you think it's fair that a teacher who really comes in only a couple times a week, 3 or 4 times a week for a few hours, gets paid more than somebody who's there 8 hours a day doing IT or doing administration or cleaning the rooms?
Since the teachers need to get like a degree or a diploma, or they need to have some skills in education, somehow it is.
So, okay, I mean, there's no right answer to this stuff. The idea here is that it's fair that some people make more money if they get paid based on certain compensable factors. If teachers are getting paid based on the compensable factors of education, well, then it is fair. If teachers are getting paid compared on the compensable factor of physical effort, then it's not fair. So we don't want to talk in HR in the language of fair and unfair. We want to talk in the language of compensable factors. So when you guys are HR managers and someone comes to your office and says, listen, I know that my colleague, my coworker, Rodrigo, is making more money than me. Why? You can explain to him, listen, there are 4 compensable factors for your job. They're this. One of them is education. Rodrigo came in with a master's. He scores 20 out of 30. Right now, you came in from college, you score a 15 out of 30 for that compensable factor. If you want to increase that compensable factor, you need to go get a master's, and then your salary will go up. Now, if you say that to an employee, they're not really going to be upset because it's so quantitative. There's no judgment involved. It's just numbers. And then it's very clear why one person gets more or less money than another person. So with this kind of thing, once we have numbers for everything, then we can use alternation ranking. With alternation ranking, what we would do is we would have like a set of cards, and this is the older way, it would be done on the computer now, and each has a job and a basic job description. You can use one factor, just like job difficulty, and you choose the highest and the lowest. So, imagine that we are at a big company with 100 employees, and you want to rank them in order of job difficulty. Well, it's really hard to do that. So what you do is you start with 2 jobs and you just compare the 2. This is very similar to alternation ranking in evaluation. So if you're comparing a marketing manager with an advertising manager, well, you just have to pick which one is a little bit harder. Okay, I think advertising is harder. So you put that on the harder and that in the easier. Then you take 2 more and you decide which is harder, which is easier. You just keep separating them into harder, easier for pairs of jobs until all the cards are ranked. This is kind of a simplistic way to do this. What I'd like you to do on the final exam is to use more of this point method, where you will determine compensable factors based on based on the comparing the jobs, based on the job description. Based on the job analysis. You'll look at the job analysis, you'll find some compensable factors, and then you will rank them. Okay, that's our step 2. Now, step 2, as I said, the key word, relative worth. Let's make sure we understand that word, and then we can take a break. So before we get to step 3, I really want to make sure we understand the word relative worth. So who is, let me ask Jonathan, who's worth more? The person in CIP who cleans the rooms or a teacher?
The teacher, of course.
Why is the teacher, so we're talking about relative, right? Relative to each other.
Yeah.
We're not saying the teacher is more important than everybody. We're just saying compared to. Relative just means compared to, right? So
Yeah.
relative to the person who cleans the rooms, you're saying the teacher is worth more. Their relative worth is higher. Why is the
Yes.
teacher worth more?
Because he's supplying the essential work in a school, right? I mean, you could clean rooms everywhere. You could go to the next office building and clean the rooms there, but like the teacher is what makes the university the university.
Okay, but when I say worth, I'm talking about money.
Yeah.
So you're talking about, I mean, there's a little bit here of like skills or ethics or, you know, the teacher's an essential worker. And yeah, that's all true. But why is the teacher worth more?
Well, because he's supplying the essential not commodity, but essential service of the university, right? The university is selling something, right? The university is just a business as well. The university is selling education. So the teacher supplies that education.
Okay,
So
and
the teacher is worth more.
Sure, and the way I would say it is the teacher brings in more money.
Yes.
The teachers bring in money. You could have a whole group of people who keep the office very clean, and you're still not going to bring in as much money as having good teachers. That might bring in more money. When we say relative worth, we are being very clear. We're talking about compensation. We're talking about money. Who brings in more money? What's the relative worth of someone who moves packages in the warehouse versus a marketing manager? Constance. Who's worth more money to the company?
The marketing manager brings more.
Sure, a lot more. You know, it's not just because the job is harder or requires more education. It's about how much money does this job bring into the company. And a marketing manager brings in a lot more money than someone who moves packages, no matter how difficult each job is. So when we talk about relative worth, this is the idea we're trying to get at. We're trying to get which job is worth more to the company, which job brings in more money to the company. You know, that's the idea of worth. Now, how do we determine this? That's our point system, where we take these compensable factors. Anais, can you explain to me again, what's a compensable factor?
Reasons why they pay you?
Sure. Reasons why you get paid more or less than someone else. And so we have all these different factors for jobs, and we look at these numbers. Now, where do the numbers come from? They just come from our head. There's no scientific formula. The same way that we were just ranking jobs, doctor is 90 and lawyers 90, that's the same way we get numbers for compensable factors. But we do get numbers. And so we have these reasons that people get paid. And at the end of the day, we're looking at who's worth more to the company. You know, there's a different relative worth, for example, between me and Cecilia or Anselm. I would argue that they are worth more to CIP. We both, now, if you look at the compensable factors in terms of skill, working conditions, effort, difficulty, education, we're probably very similar. me and them. But there are other factors too, such as, and I think a critical one for them is responsibility. I would say, and I mean, you guys might not know, but I know Anselm and Cecilia are the teachers who've been at CIP the longest. And they work most closely with like the dean and the administration of Donghua. I don't have to do anything with Donghua. I have no responsibility to deal with the deans, but Anselm and Cecilia do. Their responsibility number would be higher than mine, right? And so they might be worth more. We just want to really get that idea of relative worth. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back.